Welcome to another episode of Rudy Giuliani's Common Sense. It's our purpose to bring to bear the principle of common sense and rational discussion to the issues of our day. America was created at a time of great turmoil, tremendous disagreements, anger, hatred. It was a book written in 1776 that guided much of the discipline of thinking that brought to us the discovery of our freedoms, of our God-given freedoms. It was Thomas Paine's Common Sense, written in 1776, one of the first American bestsellers, in which Thomas Paine explained, by rational principles, the reason why these small colonies felt the necessity to separate from the Kingdom of Great Britain and the King of England. He explained their inherent desire for liberty, for freedom, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, the ability to select the people who govern them. And he explained it in ways that were understandable to all the people, not just the elite. Because the desire for freedom is universal. The desire for freedom adheres in the human mind, and it is part of the human soul. Today we face another time of turmoil, of anger, very serious partisan division. This is exactly the time we should consult our history. Look at what we've done in the past and see if we can't use it to help us now. We understand that our founders created the greatest country in the history of the world, the greatest democracy, the freest country, a country that has taken more people out of poverty than any country ever. All of us are so fortunate to be Americans. We're not a perfect country. They weren't perfect men and women, and neither are we. But they did it better than anyone else, and that has to be our goal, to keep America a leader. But a great deal of the reason for America's constant ability to self-improve is because we are able to reason. We're able to talk, we're able to discuss, we're able to analyze, we're able to apply our God-given common sense. So let's begin. This episode and some of the ones that follow, many of them, will be about presenting to you evidence that's been kept from you deliberately about a very dangerous and corrupt group of schemes that went on in Ukraine in 2016. Much of it motivated by the desire to defeat Donald Trump and to elect Hillary Clinton. It involves corruption of all kinds, and it is complicated. But the fact is that there's been a deliberate effort to keep this information from you and to lie about it. These witnesses that I am going to discuss and present to you as if it were a trial have all wanted to come to the United States and were blocked by the American Embassy, by the State Department, by the FBI to some extent, and even when they hired a lawyer to present it to the Justice Department, and even though the lawyer made it clear that this involved proven intrusions in the 2016 election, that it involved activity by then Vice President Biden that was involved in the collusion as well as corruption. Even though these things were mentioned, the Justice Department did nothing to follow up on it. It seemed that all they were interested in were the false allegations of collusion by Russians. And so you've been deprived of this evidence, and I've been attacked, as you know, seems like monumentally for being the messenger, for having had the, I think, good fortune to develop this information, because something has to be done about it. So let me tell you how it began, and then let me get to the opening statement. This all began in November of 2018. I was brought the information. The idea that I went looking for dirt on Joe Biden or that President Trump wanted me to look for dirt on Joe Biden is totally false, and a part of the conspiracy to cover up the rather vast crimes of Democrats in the Ukraine. This information was brought to me. If you want to call it dirt, the dirt was handed to me. And it wasn't dirt. It was probable cause that crime was committed. It was given to me by reliable sources All that I'm going to explain to you came from that. And I began investigating it in November of 2018 as a defense lawyer for the President of the United States, who was also a close personal friend and someone that I felt was being, and I know was being framed for a crime that he didn't commit because of the perversity of his opponents and their hatred, which seems has no limiting factor. So let me begin as if this were a trial. I did many as a prosecutor, having the great honor to stand up in court, get in front of a podium. I wish actually I had a podium now, and say to people, my name is Giuliani. It's my honor to represent the United States of America. I think I always got goosebumps when I did that. So this will be modified. It won't be quite like the opening statement of a trial, but we'll get as close to it as possible. So I make this understandable to you. The purpose of an opening statement is to give you a roadmap so that over the next couple of weeks, as we present the testimony of these witnesses, much of it on videotape, you'll be able to understand it and have it kind of link together, because that's how you prove complex and serious crimes. How would you start this? You would say that the charges here are the charges are simple, the fact pattern somewhat complicated, but easy once you unravel it. We have, at a minimum, 2 bribes. I know you're a little surprised because you all know about the one bribe, which is the one where Joe Biden tells Poroshenko that he must fire the prosecutor or he won't get his $1 billion loan guarantee. But you don't know about the other bribe, and that's going to come out both a bit in the opening statement and then with some pretty shocking testimony that we're going to present to you. So this involves 2 bribes involving then Vice President Joe Biden, and it involves collusion on the part of the White House, on the part of some officials of the Democratic National Committee and the embassy in Kiev in digging up dirt. I wonder where they got that expression, digging up dirt, on Donald Trump Jr., the Trump campaign. Paul Manafort explained to one of the witnesses by a member of the DNC right in the middle of the election, you'll hear his testimony, as we're going to destroy the Trump campaign. We're going to get him off the ballot by September of 2016. Now, remember the position I was in at the time that I heard that. I was his defense lawyer defending him against Mueller's false claims of Russian collusion. And we were 5 to 6 months before Joe Biden announced for president of the United States. So I had no thought of him as a presidential candidate. I don't want to be demeaning, but he didn't look to me like he was physically capable of running for the office of president of the United States. He did, but by the time he did, I already gathered all this evidence for the purpose of defending my client. And I am outraged at the attacks on me, not on a personal basis. I'm a pretty tough guy, and I've been threatened with death by people a lot more dangerous than these idiots. But the reality is, I'm outraged that the vast majority of the media doesn't realize, seems to ignore the fact that the reason this is being done is to intimidate me in my role as a lawyer. That's what they're doing. They're trying to kill the messenger because they can't deal with the message of this extensive Democratic corruption. With a shoe on the other foot, and I was talking about Republican corruption, they'd probably make me man of the year. And that's a double standard we have to deal with. But ladies and gentlemen, people of America, here's the evidence that was kept from you. It's easy. I mean, it begins with a confession, an admission, a confession, however you want to describe it. Many of you have probably seen it. Some of you haven't. Let me first give you the definition of the crime of bribery. Corruptly offering something of value in exchange for official action. That's the definition under the United States Code. That's pretty much a universal definition, including in the country of Ukraine. So now listen to the tape And I will tell you the words to particularly focus on, because it's in that one sentence, just one little sentence, that the crime of bribery is committed. This is a statement by Joe Biden. The date is January 23rd, 2018. And I'm just going to read you one sentence by Joe Biden. If the prosecutor is not fired, you're not getting the money. If the prosecutor is not fired, is the official action. You're not getting the money, is the something of value that's put at stake. That's the crime of bribery. All you need to add now is corruptly, and I'll show you very simply how we do that. But now you make sure that I'm right. You listen to that portion of the video.
They were walking out to press conference. I said, "No," I said, "I'm not going to. We're not going to give you the $1 billion." They said, "You have no authority. You're not the president." The president said, I said, "Call him." I said, "I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion." I said, "You're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here." And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, "I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money." Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
Well, as you see, I quoted it correctly, and it's a lot more complete than that. This is not just a bribe. This could also be considered an extortion, because this was done by threat. This wasn't like a business deal. I'm going to leave here, I think it was about 6 hours. I looked at them and said, "I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money." Well, he got fired, and they put in place someone who was solid at the time. He sure was solid, because ultimately the case on his son's crooked boss who stole $5 billion. I said $5 billion. And his son's corrupt company, Burisma, just went away. And he was able to come back to the Ukraine with his $5 billion intact, with his business intact, even though he was one of the better-known organized criminals in the Yanukovych government, leading a really good life thanks to Joe Biden's bribery of President Poroshenko. You really just need this to convict him. He does it himself. And it's worse. It's worse because in this, he never mentions that his son was under investigation by the very prosecutor who he wanted fired. He leaves it out. It's, in a way, by omission, it's a false exculpatory statement, meaning it's evidence of his guilt. It's evidence that supplies that corruptly part of corruptly offering something of value in exchange for official action. So how do we go on beyond this now to prove it? Now, this is where it gets to, you call witnesses. So we'll call witnesses. And first witness that I'm going to call, and you'll see his testimony live all throughout the trial, we'll play it, is the main witness, the man who was fired, Viktor Shokin. Viktor Shokin was the prosecutor general of Ukraine, which would make him equivalent to our attorney general, and really a little bit different. I mean, he clearly is the chief prosecutor. He handles all the crimes in the Ukraine. And Viktor Shokin was appointed to that job in 2015. I have here various statements from him. I interviewed him by Skype on January 23rd, 2018. I emphasize the time because that's when the Mueller investigation was still going on, and it is before Joe Biden was a candidate for president of the United States. And I never asked about Joe Biden. I was told about Joe Biden. I was shown that video clip that you saw, and I was shocked. I didn't believe it at first. Then I listened to it again, and I was with, other people, and I said, this is about a clearer case of bribery as I've ever seen. And I can't believe he got away with saying this. And then I said, it's going to be really tough. They're going to do everything to protect this guy. He's one of the, anointed in the annals of the swamp media. So Victor Shokin was appointed in 2015. The case against Burisma was already going on. What Victor Shokin can describe and his other prosecutors is that Mykola Zlochevsky, these are, I know, difficult names, but Mykola Zlochevsky owned a company called Burisma that was incorporated in Cyprus. And he owned it at the same time that he was the minister of the ecology and other positions under the president Yanukovych, who is the one that was very, very favorable to Russia. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to come right back, and we're going to go right to the testimony of Shokin, or at least a brief description of it. For those of you who know me, in addition to law and politics, I'm passionate about the Yankees, baseball, football, all sports to watch, golf to play, history to read, opera, classical music to listen to and watch, and cigars to relax and socialize. And I have very definite opinions on the best cigars for the right time and the right place. But the revolution in cigars took place in the 1990s. Most cigars then were machine-made with foreign ingredients. Now it's just the opposite. Most are hecho a mano, man-made, and all organic, natural, and premium. This revolution was led by one man and one man alone and his magazine, Marvin Shanken and his Cigar Aficionado magazine. Marvin had been rating wines quite successfully for Wine Spectator magazine, and he brought the rating system, Wine Spectator, to Cigar Aficionado. The first cigars rated in the 90s were soon gone, quick. Even now, the first thing I do when I get my Cigar Aficionado edition is I immediately go look at the ratings. I go look for 92, 93, 94, and I go try them. This quality comparison system revolutionized the cigar industry, and quality rose to the top. Then there's the Cigar of the Year edition. 25 selected, only one number one. The top ones are going to be hard to get. So subscribe to Cigar Aficionado right now through the link on our website. And then go get the ones that are left or order them and smoke them and see if you agree with the ratings and let me know. Sometimes I do agree. And when I don't, I let my opinion be known to Marvin. He listens very, very intently. And then he says to me, Rudy, stick to the law. Also, along with rated cigars, Cigar Aficionado has articles on politics, sports, interesting profiles, and Marvin also has Wine Spectator, which I mentioned, and a Whiskey Advocate. So if you like wine, bourbon, scotch, vodka, etc., it's a great guide to the best quality. Subscribe now to Cigar Aficionado through the link on our website. You're going to really enjoy it. It's a great read. Thank you. So we left off with Victor Shokin and what he will contribute to the trial. Victor Shokin will testify that he was investigating Burisma, attempting to get the money back that had been stolen by Mykola Zlochevsky, because when Zlochevsky was the minister of the ecology, he had granted mineral rights and oil rights to his own company, Burisma. He made a huge amount of money while he was the minister, and he kept it all outside the country. He laundered it, a lot of it through Bank Privat. So we don't know exactly how much he stole, but people think it's as much as $5 billion. All of a sudden, there was the revolution, and Yanukovych was thrown out, and his entire mafia went with him. That's what they'll call Yanukovych's mafia. And Mykola Zlochevsky was one of the more prominent members of it. They all ran away. They all had been laundering money out of the country, getting ready for this day for quite some time. So they were in good shape financially. Yanukovych went to Russia and Zlochevsky, Switzerland, I believe, or a couple of other places, but with his $5 billion. But he was very afraid that the new government, which was going to be supposedly a reform government, was going to take his business away from him. And they already began actions against him in the UK to take his money away from him. And he needed protection. He needed someone that could deal with Poroshenko, have more power than Poroshenko, and be able to, if necessary, push Poroshenko into dropping the case, of course, for a sizable bribe. He wasn't going to ask Poroshenko to do it for nothing. He hired Biden for protection of his company. If the day would come that the Ukrainian government tried to take his company away and his money away, it was going to be Biden's job to protect him. That's the second bribe. That's a bribe to the vice president of the United States. Biden agreed, and his son went to work for the company for ridiculous amounts of money. Remember, his son had no experience in oil and gas. His son had a very spotty, if not unsuccessful, record in business. His son had been involved in several questionable other attempts to sell Joe Biden's office when he was senator. The whole situation with the bank that he worked for was a scandal never investigated. He also had a company that virtually went bankrupt, and he suffers from drug addiction seriously. Many situations of in and out of rehab, one very prominent one when he failed his drug test and was thrown out of the United States Navy, just a short while before he was put on the board of this crooked company. So a very unlikely choice. There'd be no reason to hire Hunter Biden other than to buy Joe Biden. No reason. And there are witnesses who can testify to that. So you will hear that during our trial. 2 bribes. First one is Zlochevsky buys Joe Biden's protection in case Poroshenko wants to take his business away, in case the Ukrainian government wants to take his business away. And he pays him off in part by paying somewhere between $5 and $8 million to his son's company, which had no business purpose of any kind other than as a bribe to Joe Biden. There also is indications of other money going to Biden. There's a $900,000 wire transfer. A coincidence that he got fired in February, March of 2016, because on the second day of February 2016, he arrested the Burisma company. Remember all these Biden hacks say that the case was dormant? Well, right on the record, there's an arrest of Burisma on February 2nd of 2016. Hardly a dormant case. I got the files here. These are the files. They're lying. They're lying, and the press is just accepting it. It's really, really a very serious matter, the way our press is so corrupt. So, there is clear proof that Burisma was under investigation. I believe it's February 2nd, February 3rd. The prosecutor's office, really under the direction of Konstantin Kulyuk, who was Viktor Shokin's subordinate, basically raid Burisma, closed the business down. The day has now come for Joe Biden to do his part, because now the government is coming after the company. Combine that with another fact that happens in the middle of February, and that is that the prosecutor, Shokin and Kulyuk, receive a notice from Latvia, and I'm just going to read it to you because this pretty much definitively puts the lie to these Democrats who say there was no investigation. This is a document from the prosecutor's office of the Republic of Latvia, and it is dated the 18th of February 2016, and it says, according to publicly available information, Burisma Holding Limited and its director, Hunter Biden, are involved in corruption affair. The following transactions made to Burisma Holding Limited account in AS Privat Bank are known to the Latvian FIU. their financial investigation unit. And what they describe is a transfer of $14.7 million from Ukraine, WireLogic Technology, as a payment for loans. It then goes to another company, Digitech Organization, LLP, and eventually it goes from Ukraine to Latvia, Latvia to Cyprus, and there it's dispersed to people like Alan Apter, Alexander Kwasniewski, members of the board of Burisma, and two other people, Hunter Biden and his partner, Devin Archer. The only difference is the amounts of money that are sent to Alan Apter and Alexander Kwasniewski are listed. The amount sent to Archer and Biden is not. From the records of their company, however, you find that they received $3 million. This is an out-and-out money laundering case. So in addition to bribery, this is what you would call a smoking gun for a prosecutor. Right on paper, in more detail than I just described it. I mean, here's, if you'd like to take a look, this is the document in English, just so you know it's an authentic document. This is the document or part of it in Ukrainian, in which the money laundering is demonstrated about 4 or 5 different ways. There's the chart of the money laundering. This is all from the files of the prosecutor's office, the prosecutor that wasn't investigating Burisma and Hunter Biden, except right in the file on February 16th of 2016, they were investigating Hunter Biden. Liars. They're liars. They're really, really serial liars. Just at that time, coincidentally, just at that time, and Shokin was in the middle of this, there are 3 telephone calls between the Vice President of the United States and the President of Ukraine, Poroshenko, like February 5th, February 8th, February 16th. We'll get the exact dates for you. It doesn't appear to be any other month where there are 3 phone calls between them, and it's right in the middle of Burisma being raided and Hunter Biden's name coming up as one of the principals in the money laundering scheme. So it doesn't take a lot to figure out what those conversations were about. Would be nice if somebody had investigated this and gotten those conversations, wouldn't it? Like the FBI or the Justice Department. Since we have a prima facie case of bribery and got a prima facie case of money laundering, but I guess if you're a Democrat, they don't do things like that. But there are 3 telephone conversations, and Shokin says that during that period of time, the president of Ukraine was coming to him, Shokin will testify, and telling him he better go easy on the company. And he better go easy on Hunter Biden because Joe Biden has given him a lot of pressure. Telephone calls kind of corroborate that, 3 of them, within a week and a half. And then on Shokin's end of it, we find out the other side of what Joe Biden admitted on tape, demanding that Shokin be fired. And if not, you're not getting your loan guarantee. Poroshenko comes to him and says, I've got to ask you to resign because if you don't, we're going to lose our loan guarantee and we're pretty much on the brink of bankruptcy, basically because of all the stealing of the prior administration. And we will later find out all of the stealing Poroshenko was doing himself. So Shokin has to leave. There's no doubt that he's telling the truth. The idea that he's corrupt or whatever else he is, all he does is corroborate what Biden says on tape. He can be corrupt as heck. I mean, a lot of corrupt people make very powerful witnesses. I mean, most of the really bad criminals I convicted, there was usually a corrupt person who turned or, testified against him. However, this idea that he was so corrupt is also created. We have documents here showing his entire record. If he was corrupt, he really hid it. He never was arrested, never was charged with corruption. never in all of his years of law practice had a complaint against him. If he was corrupt, he sure wasn't good at it because I've met him. He's not a rich man. Some of these people really have incredible wealth, billions from their stealing. It's not Shokin. But in any event, he's a corroborating witness to Joe Biden's confession. He says, yeah, Biden was telling the truth. He got Poroshenko to fire me, and he got Poroshenko to fire me because I was investigating his son, I was investigating his patron, Zlochevsky, and I was investigating the Burisma company, and I had finally kind of hit pay dirt with the money laundering that I showed you. This testimony is then backed up by documents that I have here. I also have here something of great concern, and that is in September of this year, Mr. Shokin, after his affidavit was revealed publicly, in which he lays all of this out under oath, not like this whistleblower, not wanting to come forward. This guy is under oath, ready to testify. After that happened, all of a sudden, one night, he got very sick. He went to the hospital. According to the medical report, he almost died twice. He was taken from Ukraine because of fear that this was a poisoning. And he went to the same hospital that has saved other people that were subjected to Ukrainian and Russian poisoning. And the doctor is world famous. It's Dr. I believe his name is Korpan. And I remember this from a prior incident in Ukraine because the name of the clinic is the Rudolph Clinic. So you kind of remember Rudolph is not that common a name. But we will present to you in the course of the trial, and when we get to his testimony, we'll present to you all the medical records from Austria, not Ukraine. And I'd like you to look at this. Just very simple, and we'll go into detail on it. But primary diagnosis, I think that says mercury poisoning. That's a translation from the German. I translated it myself using a iPhone app. It says mercury poisoning. It then goes on to describe how much mercury was in his system. It's about 5 times more than you can possibly tolerate. They used denominations like 2 is the top, and he was at 9. Dr. Korpan says there's no other way this could have happened but by a poisoning. You couldn't do this accidentally. So there was an attempt to kill Shokin, which gives you an idea of how serious what we're dealing with is. This is a very, very serious matter. There are other witnesses that we will discuss in our next episode. Then we'll go through the testimony of Andrei Teleshenko, who has a great deal to say because he was both a prosecutor and then later he was the number 3 or 4 person in the Ukrainian embassy in Washington during the election. And he will testify at great length as to how the Ukrainian embassy, the Ukrainian officials conspired with the Democratic National Committee and Hillary Clinton's campaign. And he was directly asked to dig up all the dirt that he could on Donald Trump Jr. He was asked to see if he could find evidence of a connection of Donald Trump to Russian organized crime, Ukrainian organized crime. And he was told very intimately about a false piece of evidence that was created. That's established by his testimony, and it's established by this text from a woman working for the DNC named Chalupa to Luis Miranda, another smoking gun that corroborates the fact that she was feeding information from Ukrainians to a reporter, an American reporter named Michael Isikoff. Isn't this exactly what they were investigating Trump for, using foreign information in an American campaign? She brags about how successful she is. And then she says another big thing is coming up that I've got to talk to you about. That's going to be the phony Black Ledger. We're going to prove that it's phony and that it was created not so much to prosecute Manafort, but in the words of Chalupa and in the words of another character here, Lashenko, who actually did the deed of leaking it. It was intended to destroy the Trump campaign with a plan to execute it in August and September, a plan that Chalupa claims was discussed with an American member of Congress, who we will name as we move along. And then we'll have several other witnesses that will show the length and the breadth of the corruption. We will produce a legal opinion because there's doubt as to whether these constituted violations of Ukrainian law. Mr. Lutsenko had changed his testimony on that, actually 3 times. But one reason might be because Lutsenko is not a lawyer. It's kind of unusual that Joe Biden would recommend a non-lawyer to be prosecutor general of Ukraine. The other reason might be that he was protecting his patron, Poroshenko, because what you're going to find out is there's testimony that Poroshenko may have received. That's the president of the Ukraine, Biden's pal. That's the guy that Biden intimidated. But Poroshenko wasn't going to let Zlochevsky come back to Ukraine, keeping his $5 billion and getting his company without, as they say in The Godfather, wetting his beak. It is well known that Poroshenko took something out of almost every transaction in Ukraine. Here, there's a dispute about exactly how much. It could range up as high as $100 million. It sounds strange to you and me, but that's what was happening in the Yanukovych administration. And according to witnesses that we'll call, things were much worse under Poroshenko. And the corruption in Ukraine became much worse during the Obama administration because Americans started to participate in the corruption at a much higher level. And one last thing that I find very, very disturbing, and I think my client would find this very disturbing. This is an accounting chamber decision. This is an independent accounting group in Ukraine. It's dated December 19, 2017, kind of toward the end of the Obama administration. And it finds that there is 440 projects of international technical assistance given by other countries to Ukraine, with a total cost of over $5.2 billion, in which there doesn't appear to be either documentation, any evidence of work done, any support to justify the money. The vast majority of this money came from the United States. And the police in Ukraine began an investigation really to kind of answer what they thought was going to be the Obama administration coming down really hard on them for wasting so much money. Instead, you will hear testimony that representatives of our embassy working for Ambassador, first I think it's Pyatt, and then Jovanovic, they told them not to go forward with the investigation. That we're friends and this doesn't really matter. And 5.2 billion, maybe 3.54 billion being our own money. It doesn't matter if they were wasting it. Well, you know why? The witnesses will tell you the reason is that the basic problem here, for at least 3 billion of that 5.2, is that when America was giving aid to Ukraine, it was doing it through what are called non-government organizations, not directly to Ukraine. A lot of that money never showed up in the Department of Ecology or the Prosecutor General's office. A lot of it kind of stuck with the NGO. There's a common theme in all of these NGOs, by the way, as they will testify. They call them children of Soros. One of the main ones is Antac, which had its own investigation that was corruptly, dismissed by Jovanovic. But all of them are extremely left-wing. There'll be testimony to that effect and documentary proof. And this still has never been explained. We're talking about billions of dollars in American aid that's unaccounted for, that went to Soros's NGOs like Soros's, extremely left-wing. Some of them not even in Ukraine. There's one here that involved Italy getting $4 million to straighten out corruption. It was intended for the Prosecutor General's office, and it was given to a NGO in Italy. And then you wonder why, when they fire Shokin, they can get people from Italy and England and Germany and to all say that he's corrupt. They're all people from the NGOs that were being paid off. This is a vast crime. This is probably, obviously, going to be the biggest scandal so far of this century. Let's hope there's none greater. It makes Teapot Dome look cheap when we get finished with the amounts of money. And there's a lot more to it. And in the next episode, we'll finish the outline. You've got most of it. And then we'll get right to the testimony. And you'll get to see some of these witnesses on camera for yourself to see that we have something called proof, which Democrats do not have against the president and never had. And we have something else on our side that makes it easy to accept all the attacks on me, my reputation, my family, and the threats. You know what we have on our side? Truth. Spent a lot of my career fighting corruption. I've done many, many difficult corruption cases. And some of them I've done when nobody thought the case could be proved or it could ever be done, like the Commission of the Mafia, Wall Street, using the racketeering laws in ways that had never been used before, sending 2 Nazis back to what they deserved, with one case being terribly controversial. People ask me, how can you take it, all the criticism and all the... Because when I go to bed at night, I know that I'm doing what I wanted to do from the day I became a lawyer. I'm serving justice. I know it sounds corny, but this is corruption. This is corruption at a very, very high level. It doesn't matter if it's a Democrat or a Republican. It was an American vice president that sold out his office, and he sold out the integrity of the United States of America. We are a joke in Ukraine. We go there and we say, you should stop the corruption. And every time Joe Biden went there, they laughed at him. You're telling us to stop the corruption? And you're pulling millions out of here? We have got to fix this. It's a matter of national security. It's a matter of having a solid relationship and creating a solid situation in a country that's enormously important to us. But if we're going to send them $100 million in aid, and only 20 million is going to get to where it's supposed to go, maybe you can see why the president was concerned. And because the Democrats are the major beneficiaries of this corruption, maybe you can see why they're doing this phony impeachment. Because, boy, this is phony as you know what, based on hearsay and nonsense. This is based on evidence. And you're going to hear it all over the next couple of weeks. Thank you very much.